was raised Jewish, and while I attended Hebrew school, we weren't religious. For us, it was all about the brisket and the matzo balls. Every year, right before Passover, my mother, Bernice, cooked up a storm and the house smelled of garlic and onions and schmaltz. Right before our home was filled with relatives, Bernice magically appeared in the doorway to the den where my father and I were watching the Cubs lose. Dressed in a floral housecoat, cigarette dangling from her lips with an ash half its length ready to fall but wouldn't, she'd hold up a wooden spoon in the air and proclaim, "Come taste my balls!" My father and I would exchange knowing looks. It didn't matter. We were at the top of the ninth and the Cubs may pull out a win. No, the fluffy balls inquisition always took precedence. Translated into English, 1, are they better than last year? 2, are they too hard? 3, do they need more salt? Each year, the final verdict was reached. Her balls were better than those from the previous, and I am convinced that's why they were married for almost 50 years. I was an only child and never felt as though I really fit in. So I used to fantasize about being part of a big family like the Brady Bunch. That longing wore off immediately when my cousins from the suburbs showed up. Every holiday, right after dinner, my cousin Susan would ask me if I wanted to watch her beat up her brother Peter. To which I replied, no, I'm good. Then I'd always make my way to my mom's side, who knew I felt out of place in my own home. She'd put her arm around me and we heard screams emanating from the foyer, and we turned to my mother's cousin Luba, who seemed completely unfazed that her daughter was beating the shit out of her son. And with that, Bernice would slide a piece of noodle kugel in front of me, and we shared a quiet understanding that next year Peter and Susan would probably show up alive at Rosh Hashanah. At the end of the evening, Bernice sent everyone home with their own care packages. Tubs of Cool Whip containers saved throughout the year in preparation for their leftover convoy would be filled with brisket and soup and kugel, and of course, her balls. Each container was lovingly labeled with a piece of masking tape placed across the top of the lid, her name written in pen, "Love, Bernice." When I got older, I decided to bring home the woman I was to marry to meet my parents, Bernice and Bob. Before this event, however, I made Bernice swear she would not, under any circumstance, ask my future wife to taste her balls. With cigarette dangling from her lips and the wooden spoon in her hand, she looked at me and said, "When have I ever embarrassed you?" That answer was her way of promising to obey my request, and with that, the brisket Jew introduced the corned beef Catholic to Jewish life. We weren't in the house 5 minutes when Bernice got down to business. She had an important question for my partner. Did she like gefilte fish? My partner, who of course had never tasted a fish ball in her life, didn't have time to answer because she was suddenly being dragged toward the kitchen by my mother. I followed them like an ambulance chaser. And as Bernice held her wooden spoon in the air, stabbed a piece of gefilte fish with a fork, and held it up for her to taste. "Here, eat this, you'll die." My partner lived. And over the next 17 years, she acquired a taste for gefilte fish and for my mother. The years went by and we celebrated every holiday with food and traditions merged from both families. Unfortunately, when Bernice passed shortly after my father a few years ago, my 17-year relationship also died. And so did I. There I was, a grown woman of a certain age, who felt like that lonely only child again. After the split, I didn't want to go to all that trouble and fuss just for me. So when and if I ever got hungry, dinner was a bag of popcorn. Then came the election of 2016. I started stress eating and couldn't shove food into my mouth fast enough. I reached for comfort foods, mac and cheese, ice cream, cookies, potato chips. Things I used to eat in moderation, I now consider the 4 major food groups. I started to notice my pants felt snug. Not only didn't they fit, they hurt. I never had pants hurt before. One day, while walking down Michigan Avenue, I caught a glimpse of someone in a store window who I thought looked familiar, but didn't quite recognize. Me. It was at that point I realized I had election fat. As I stared at my reflection, I reflected on how all of this happened and concluded it wasn't due to the election or the breakup or being an adult orphan. It was due to the fact that I didn't feel I was worth it. I stopped doing things I loved because things had changed. I hadn't really changed. I allowed things to change me. So there I was, standing on the corner of Been There and Fuck It. And was faced with 2 choices. I could return home and binge the next 7 years of The Good Wife, which apparently I was not. And ruminate about how I'll never date again, and I will die alone because I'm going to outlive my cat. Where I found everyone on the planet was having a great life with friends and family and dinner parties. And before I signed off, I noticed my friend Arlene posted an interesting recipe for poached salmon she made in this thing called the Instant Pot. Go with me on this. She claimed it took 3 minutes and there was 1 pot to clean. Seriously. I was skeptical. Bernice never had a crock pot or a pressure cooker, and neither did I. Frankly, the thing scared me. So I did some research and I decided I'm only one person. I tried to get the small model. I mean, really seriously, how much food could I make for one person? Cut to a month later. I was making so much food and losing weight. I needed to buy the large Instant Pot because I started having dinner parties again. And then I came upon the folder. The brown folder which stored Bernice's legacy, her recipes. I carefully took them out and read each one in her own scraggly handwriting, replete with notes in the margins. I knew these notes were meant for me to use when she was no longer around. Her way of explaining how to make them. Passive-aggressive tips like, season both sides unless you only plan on eating one side of your food, but what do I know? And the occasional footnote to justify certain ingredients. Bacon grease is an essential oil. So I brought the recipes to life and we started cooking together once again. And Bernice still had the ability to make people's mouths water, and everyone wanted leftovers. I sent friends home with food and old yogurt containers and my good glassware. I was running out of storage containers and I got to the point where I was ambulance chasing friends down to return the Pyrex. So I began to search for something special because Bernice's food deserved to be served in something better than an old coolant tub. I had an idea. Maybe I could make them. I wasn't sure what they would look like, but they needed to be fun, like Bernice, and hold the mountain of leftovers from the potlucks I had started hosting. Most importantly, these containers needed to be able to be personalized, just like she used to do with the masking tape. I could hear Bernice say, "You made it. Who else's name belongs on the label?" I had my doubts about creating these containers, and immediately was silenced by the Bernice voice. "What do you have to lose except for 20 or so pounds?" She was right. It was time to lose the election fat, and then I remembered the last time I was scared, I sold a television series, I fell in love, and I learned I could drive 1,800 miles across country alone to start a new life and be okay. So I unpacked the dishes I hadn't used in ages. I grabbed her wooden spoon and got to work. And guess what? Instant Potluck, Make It and Take It Containers was born. And so was I. Everyone is invited to my table. And as Bernice would say, "Come sit here. Eat this, you'll die."